My name is Sarah, and my life has become a whirlwind of unexpected trials. Now in my early 30s, I can reflect on how it feels like I've lived multiple lifetimes in just a few short years. Everything seemed perfect when my husband, Daniel, and I were living in Austin, Texas. Our cozy home was filled with the laughter of our energetic 3-year-old son, Jack. Daniel worked as a financial analyst and often traveled for work. I had grown accustomed to managing things on my own while he was away, but I never imagined how much more complicated life would become. The first major change came when Daniel's mother, Margaret, moved in with us. At 65, she had just lost her husband, Daniel's father, and her health had begun to deteriorate due to arthritis. When we offered her a place to stay, it felt like the right decision. I knew it might present some challenges, but I believed we could handle it. Initially, things seemed fine. Margaret helped out here and there, and we made an effort to welcome her. But soon, the situation began to spiral. Margaret's behavior shifted from small inconveniences to ongoing tension. She would leave dishes in the sink, promising to clean them later, but it never happened. I'd remind her, and she'd apologize, but nothing changed. The mess piled up, and I was left to clean it up by myself. Margaret also began playing mind games. She'd offer to run errands or help out, but then forget or claim she wasn't up for it. This became especially frustrating when Daniel was away, and I felt like I was running the house on my own. It was as though Margaret's behavior worsened every time Daniel traveled, intentionally making things harder for me. One evening, everything came to a head. A storm was raging outside as I prepared Jack for bed. Margaret walked into the kitchen and started criticizing the way I'd organized things. I tried to stay calm, assuring her that I was nearly done, but her rudeness escalated, and my patience began to fray. As the storm raged outside, I tried to ignore her complaints, but then things took a dark turn. In a fit of frustration, Margaret locked the door, refusing to let us back inside. Jack and I were left standing in the pouring rain. I knocked and pleaded, but she ignored us. I felt a surge of terror as I stood there with my son, knowing we had nowhere to go. A neighbor eventually saw us and offered shelter. We waited in a nearby park until the storm passed. I held Jack close, trying to remain calm. Once the rain stopped, the police arrived, called by the concerned neighbor. They took us to the local station, where I met with Uncle John, Daniel's uncle. He had been contacted by Daniel, who was worried about the situation with Margaret. Uncle John, a retired lawyer, listened as I explained what had happened. He told me Daniel had been concerned for some time about Margaret's behavior. It was a small comfort, but it didn't change what we were facing. Margaret was defensive when confronted, dismissing the situation entirely. Uncle John suggested I seek legal advice, which left me feeling overwhelmed. I didn't want to make things worse, but it was clear things had to change. Back at the house, Margaret's passive-aggressive behavior continued as if nothing had happened. She left dirty dishes everywhere and found new ways to create tension daily. It felt like I was living with a time bomb, constantly walking on eggshells, trying to keep things normal for Jack. Daniel, now stationed in New York, called regularly, but the conversations were filled with frustration. He wanted to fix things, but being so far away left him feeling powerless. I could hear the strain in his voice, and I began to feel like the distance between us was growing. The worst part was when Margaret started using Daniel's job against me, accusing him of abandoning her, which made me feel guilty and drained. Every day felt like a new battle, and I was becoming more isolated and exhausted. The tipping point came when Daniel decided to return to Austin for a few days to address the situation in person. I hoped his presence would provide some relief, but I also felt anxious. When he arrived, the tension in the house was thick. I showed him the mounting issues, dirty dishes, constant complaints, and growing hostility. Daniel listened, but Margaret denied everything, claiming I was exaggerating. In an attempt to make him understand, I decided to record one of Margaret's outbursts. It was a risky move, but I needed proof of the verbal abuse that had become a daily occurrence. I hoped hearing it for himself would help Daniel grasp the severity of the situation. The night before Daniel was set to leave, we had another explosive argument. Margaret's insults were sharp and unrelenting. I captured the exchange on my phone. The next morning, Daniel listened to the recording. His face showed shock and sorrow as he heard his mother's cruel words. It was clear that he was struggling to come to terms with what had been happening. Over the next few days, it became obvious that things couldn't continue as they were. The storm we had weathered outside mirrored the chaos within our family. As much as I had hoped things would improve on their own, I knew we needed to take decisive action to reclaim our home and our lives. With Daniel now fully aware of the situation, we began exploring options. We looked into legal measures and even discussed the possibility of placing Margaret in a care facility if her behavior worsened. The thought was daunting, but the more we considered it, the clearer it became that we had no other choice. Margaret's behavior wasn't just inconvenient, it was toxic, and something had to change. As Daniel and I faced this crisis together, we knew we had to act to protect our family, even if it meant making difficult, painful decisions. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were united, ready to confront the storm in our lives and make it through to the other side. What I did was a pivotal moment. It was hard for Daniel to accept his mother's harsh words, but it was necessary for him to understand how deep Margaret's animosity went so he could make informed choices about her future. After listening to the recording, Daniel and I had a somber conversation about what to do next. We both knew that the decisions we made would impact our family's future. "I didn't realize it was this bad," Daniel said, regret filling his voice. "I should have paid more attention. I thought things might get better on their own." I nodded, a mix of anger and relief stirring inside me. "It's been difficult doing this alone, but now that you're here, we have to figure out our next move." We weighed our options. The idea of putting Margaret in a care facility was something we had avoided, but it was starting to look like the only viable solution. Her behavior had become erratic, and living with her was no longer safe. We contacted a few care facilities for information. It felt overwhelming, each visit a step toward an uncertain future, but we had no choice but to proceed. Meanwhile, Margaret's behavior grew more volatile. She caught wind of our discussions and accused us of conspiring against her. She tried to manipulate Daniel, casting herself as the victim. It was emotionally exhausting dealing with her constant threats and accusations. One evening, Margaret confronted me in the kitchen, her eyes icy. "You think you can just get rid of me, don't you?" she hissed. "You and Daniel are plotting to throw me out of my own son's home." I took a deep breath, keeping calm. "Margaret, we're trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Your behavior has made it impossible for us to live together. We've explored care facilities because we need professional help." Her face contorted with fury. "You think you're better than me, huh? I'm not some old woman you can just cast aside. I'm your family, too." I turned away, my heart pounding. Confronting her made things worse, so I focused on what was best for our family, for Jack's sake. Days passed as we continued to explore care options. Eventually, we found a place that seemed promising, comfortable, and with a caring staff. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best we could find. We scheduled a visit to ensure it met Margaret's needs. Soon after, Daniel had to return to New York for work. His departure was bittersweet. I felt relieved that he would return to his routine, but anxious about handling Margaret on my own. We had set a date for her move, and I dreaded the confrontation that awaited. The day of Margaret's move was one of the toughest moments. She resisted at every step. Her anger was palpable as we packed her things. "I can't believe you're doing this to me," Margaret shouted as we loaded her belongings into the car. "You're destroying this family. How could you be so cruel?" I tried to stay calm. "Margaret, this isn't about cruelty. It's about finding a solution that ensures everyone's well-being. We can't keep living like this. You need professional care, and this facility can provide that." Daniel tried reasoning with her, but Margaret wouldn't be appeased. The emotional toll was unbearable. At the facility, the staff were kind and supportive. They took Margaret's belongings and reassured us that she'd be well cared for. As we left, I saw the sadness in Daniel's eyes. We knew this was necessary, but it was still difficult. At home, the silence was deafening. The house felt empty, and while there was relief, there was also a lingering sense of guilt. Our departure for Italy felt surreal. The house was eerily quiet without Margaret's constant presence. The transition was bittersweet, but I felt relief. Daniel and I had worked hard to prepare, and as we packed the last of our things and said our goodbyes, excitement and apprehension mixed within me. Jack, though only 3, seemed to sense the change. He clung to me more than usual. I reassured him, making this new chapter feel like an adventure. Daniel was excited about our fresh start in Italy, but I knew we were both carrying the weight of our recent experiences. The long flight was tiring, and Jack grew restless, but as we landed in Rome, the beauty of the city was a welcome distraction. It felt like a new beginning, far from the conflict we had left behind. Our new home was in a charming town, surrounded by hills and picturesque landscapes. The change in scenery was immediately soothing. It felt like a stark contrast to the stress we had been under. As we settled in, I felt hopeful that this fresh start would bring us the peace and happiness we'd been longing for. Daniel's job in Italy allowed for more flexibility, giving him more time to spend with Jack and me. We explored our new surroundings together, and the fresh start began to heal some of our past wounds. I joined a local mothers group and found comfort in connecting with other parents. Their support was a welcome change from the negativity we had faced before. I kept in touch with Sarah's Uncle John, who had been a rock during our toughest times. He continued to check in, offering guidance as we adjusted to our new life. Jack thrived in the new environment. The open spaces, playgrounds, and Italian language classes became part of his daily routine. It was heartwarming to see him so happy. I still reflected on the decision to place Margaret in a care facility. I hoped she was receiving the care she needed. I tried to push away the guilt, reminding myself that it was a decision made out of necessity, not malice. We had done it for the well-being of everyone involved. Daniel and I started looking ahead with optimism. We'd been through so much and had emerged stronger. The move to Italy wasn't just a change of scenery, it was an opportunity to rebuild our lives, free from the shadows of our past struggles. One afternoon, as I watched Jack play in the garden, I felt immense gratitude. The sun shone brightly, and the air was filled with laughter. The tranquility of our new home was a balm for our souls. Daniel joined us, and we shared a simple meal, talking about our hopes for the future. For the first time in a long time, the conversation was filled with excitement, not conflict. As we embraced this new chapter, I knew that challenges lay ahead, but we had learned so much about ourselves and each other. We had set boundaries, made difficult decisions, and found strength in each other. The journey had been tough, but it had led us to a place where we could begin anew. Moving to Italy was more than just a change of location, it was a fresh start, a new beginning. The echoes of our past struggles faded, replaced by the promise of a brighter future. With hope in our hearts, we were ready to face whatever came our way, together. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.